The central concourse of Sanctuary 7 had been repaired. The scars from the fight were polished away, the bloodstains cleansed. It was beautiful again, but the memory of what had happened there hung in the sweet air. The Veil were gathered, their skin showing nervous patterns of gray and pale blue. They were not alone. In neat, silent rows stood the human Marines, out of their heavy armor now, wearing simple dark uniforms. They looked even more solid that way, a wall of quiet strength. Captain Jae-suk stood with Day and Hana near the main entrance. They watched as a new ship, sleek and shining like a pearl, docked with the station. This was the ship of the Galactic Concorde. It moved without a sound. The door opened. Envoy Valerius stepped through. He was tall and willowy, with skin like polished silver and large, compassionate eyes. He wore flowing robes that seemed to glow with a soft inner light. He was the very picture of civilized grace. He looked around the concourse, his gaze passing over the Veil with pity, and over the humans with a faint, careful disapproval. "Administrator Day," Valerius said, his voice a soothing melody. "The Concorde rejoices in your safety. Our hearts ached when we heard of your plight. We moved as swiftly as diplomacy and consensus allowed." He then turned to Jae-suk. "And you must be the captain of the unscheduled vessel. Your assistance is noted. However, the reports of the engagement are troubling. Greatly troubling." Day bowed his head in the traditional greeting. "We are grateful for your concern, Envoy." Valerius smiled gently. "Concern is the foundation of our civilization. It is why we abhor violence. The scenes from your security feeds the primitive projectiles, the brutal close-quarters combat, the destruction of station property. This is not how advanced species resolve conflict. It is a regression, a sickness." He stepped forward, addressing the room. "The K-Tharg are a tragedy. They are a species lost to aggression. Our way is to contain them, to isolate them, to hope that in time they will see the light of peace. To meet their violence with greater violence only feeds the cycle. It makes us like them." Hana listened, and for the first time, the envoy's words did not feel like wisdom. They felt like a soft, smothering blanket. She remembered the feeling of the K-Tharg commander's gaze, seeing her as an object to be sold. She remembered the helpless silence of her people. Jae-suk had been standing perfectly still. Now he spoke. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the envoy's melodic tones like a knife. "Your way," he said, "left them to die." A ripple went through the Veil. No one spoke to a Concorde envoy like that. Valerius looked pained. "We offered every diplomatic. You offered words," Jae-suk interrupted, calmly. "The K-Tharg offered plasma bolts and slavery. When one side has decided on violence, your consensus is just a list of future victims." He looked at Day, then at the gathered Veil. "We come from a world that does not forgive. A falling rock does not care for your philosophy. A virus does not respect your neutrality. On Earth, to be passive is to be removed from the gene pool. We learn to act, to protect our own." Envoy Valerius sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. "And so you become the rock. You become the virus, you see? This Deathworld mentality, it is a poison. It will drag you down into endless war. We invite you, Captain, and your species, to learn a better way, to lay down your weapons and join the community of civilized beings." The concourse was silent. All eyes were on Day. He was the leader. He had always believed in the Concorde's way. He had preached nonviolence even as the K-Tharg boarded. He looked at Valerius. The embodiment of everything he had been taught was right. Then he looked at Jae-suk, at Sergeant Taeshik, at Corporal Ji-hun, who stood with his arm in a sling, his face impassive. Day's skin began to change. The gray of fear and the blue of sorrow melted away. A new color bloomed across his chest and up his neck, a warm, steady amber, the color of resolve. He stepped forward, away from the envoy, and stood beside Captain J. Suk. "You offered us condolences," Day said, his voice firmer than anyone had ever heard it. "They offered us action. You define civilization by the absence of conflict. They define it by the protection of the helpless." He turned to face his people. "I have waited powerlessly my whole life. I will not do it again. I will not ask my children to do it. We will learn from them." A murmur, then a wave of color swept through the veil. Shades of amber, of determined yellow, of solid green spread through the crowd. It was not the flash of anger. It was the slow, steady burn of a decision made. Envoy Valerius was stunned. "You would embrace this? This brutality?" "We would embrace strength," Hannah said, stepping forward to stand with Day. Her own skin shone with the cool, clear blue of scientific certainty. "Not to attack, but to ensure no one can attack us again. We will learn to be hard where we need to be, so we can remain soft where we wish to be. We will learn from the Deathworlders." J. Suk gave a single, slow nod. He looked at the envoy. "We do not seek war, but we will never again stand by while the innocent are harmed. If that makes us barbarians in your peaceful garden, so be it. Earth will stand as a sentinel world. Our offer is not just protection. It is the choice to become strong enough to protect yourselves." He turned and walked towards the airlock leading to his ship. His Marines fell in behind him, their steps a single, solid rhythm on the deck. But before the humans could leave, a group of Vale broke from the crowd. There were 12 of them. Young engineers, gardeners, even artists. Hannah was among them. They carried small packs. "Captain," they said, understanding. "They wish to go with you." Ji-Suk stopped and looked at the volunteers. "It will not be easy. Our ship is not like your station. Our world is not like your home." A young Vale engineer, his skin a bright, eager yellow, spoke up. "We have spent our lives building beautiful things that can be broken by a fist. We wish to learn how to build a fist, so that we may choose when to keep it open." Hannah met J-Suk's gaze. "You have data on a Class 12 death world, but you lack a complete study of its most successful native species. Let me be your xenobiologist. Let us learn what strength truly is." J-Suk looked at Lieutenant Min-Ji, who gave a slight, approving nod. He looked at Sergeant Tashik, who simply said, "They've got spine, Captain. We can work with that." "Very well," J-Suk said. "You will be guests, and you will learn." They boarded the unyielding Resolve. The humans and the Vale volunteers stood together in the airlock as the door sealed, cutting off the view of the gleaming Concorde ship and the beautiful, fragile station dot in the concourse. Envoy Valerius stood alone amidst the changed Vale. The old order, the order of passive hope, was gone. It had not been destroyed by human weapons. It had been shattered by a simple, powerful idea that the powerless did not have to remain. So the unyielding Resolve detached from Sanctuary 7. Its engines, which did not glow with pretty light, but burned with raw fusion fire, powered up. With a surge that vibrated through the station's hull, the angular ship shot forward. It did not move with a graceful curve. It moved in a straight, uncompromising line towards the edge of the star system, and then, with a flash that bent the light around it, vanished into warp dot. It left behind more than just a memory. It left a wake of changed minds. It left a people who were no longer just waiting. And it left a message, ringing in the silent void, for any predator who might be listening. The garden now had sentinels, and they were from Earth. The station was quiet again. The soft lights of Sanctuary 7 glowed, the air clean and sweet once more. But everything was different. The veil moved through the concourses like ghosts, their colors muted with shock and a dawning, bewildered awe. They gave wide berth to the human marines, who stood guard or moved in small, quiet teams, checking corners and systems. The humans were not loud, but their presence was heavy, like a change in gravity that Hana had been asked to come to the human ship. Captain J. Suk wanted a scientific liaison, someone who understood the station's biosphere. Day had agreed, his eyes still wide with the aftermath of violence. He would stay and comfort their people. The airlock connecting Sanctuary 7 to the unyielding Resolve cycled with a series of solid, mechanical thunks. Hana stepped through, and the world changed. The first thing she felt was the weight. It pushed down on her shoulders, a constant, firm pressure. The artificial gravity here was stronger, much stronger than anything on the station. She had to concentrate to walk, her steps becoming careful and deliberate. The air was different, too. It was cooler, drier. It carried faint, clean smells of metal, ozone, and something else, something organic and sharp. The corridor was all hard angles and gray composite. Lights were bright and functional, not soft and ambient. Screens showed scrolling data, schematics, and rotating images of a blue and white planet. Lieutenant Minji met her. Without her helmet, Hana could see she was a woman with sharp, observant eyes and black hair tied back tightly. "This way, please," Minji said, her voice polite but direct. "The captain is on the bridge, but he asked me to show you our med bay first. One of your people was injured in the initial boarding. We treated him." They walked. Hana felt the eyes of human crew members on her. They glanced, nodded politely, and returned to their work. There was no fear in them, no pity, just a calm assessment. They looked at her the way she might look at a delicate but interesting specimen. The med bay was clean and bright. A Veil male, who had been struck by a stray K-Farg limb during the chaos, rested on a bed. He looked peaceful, but Hana's eyes were drawn to the other patient. It was the Marine, Corporal Choi Ji-hun. He sat on the edge of a medical cot, his upper body armor and suit peeled down to his waist. A medic was applying a clean dressing to his left shoulder and upper arm. The injury was a vicious burn. The skin was an angry, blistered red and black, melted and terrible. Hana had seen plasma wounds before. On a Veil, such an injury would be a catastrophic, life-threatening trauma. The patient would be in a healing coma, fighting systemic shock. Ji-hun was talking to the medic. "It's fine, Doc, just stiff. Can I have my shirt back?" The medic, a woman with a tired smile, shook her head. "The graft needs another hour to set, Choi. Sit still." "You got lucky. Another inch, and it would have cooked the bone. Feels like a sunburn," Ji-hun muttered, then noticed Hana. He gave a small, tight nod. His face pale, but his eyes clear. Hana approached slowly, her scientific mind overriding her fear. You are in pain." Ji-hun shrugged his good shoulder. "Sure, but it's manageable." The doc here numbed it. "Mostly it itches. Manageable?" Hana repeated softly. She looked at the wound, then at his face. He was alert, coherent. "Your physiology? It resists the energy transfer?" The medic answered, sealing the dressing. "Our tissues are dense. Connective fibers are tough. We evolved on a world with extreme UV radiation, frequent volcanic activity, and atmospheric electrical storms. Our baseline for harmful energy is high." She patted Ji-hun's good shoulder. "He'll have a nasty scar. He'll be back on duty in a week." A week. For that, Hana was silent. Minji led her out of the med bay and toward the bridge. On the way, they passed an open mess hall. A screen on the wall was showing a rotating informational display. The title read, Earth, Sol System, Class 12 Deathworld, Planetary Overview. Hannah stopped, staring. The images were not artist renditions. They were real. She saw oceans whipped into mountains of water by storms that spanned continents. She saw land masses cracking open, spewing liquid rock and ash into the sky. She saw forests where the plants had thorns longer than her arm, and animals with multiple eyes and rows of teeth that looked like blades. She saw a vast, beautiful desert where the temperature swing between day and night could shatter stone. Text scrolled, asterisk gravity, 9.81 meters per second squared. Atmospheric composition, nitrogen, oxygen, high variability. Biosphere, hyper-competitive. Note, over 70% of planetary life forms are directly or indirectly toxic to unprotected human life. Asterisk, Class 12? Hannah whispered. The highest category the Concord has, Minji said quietly, standing beside her. A world where every single aspect of the environment is actively hostile to complex life. A world that tries to kill you every single day. On the screen, the image changed to a simple list. Common mild hazards of Earth. It included things like bacterial agents capable of consuming flesh in under 72 hours, fungal spores that induce permanent neurological paralysis. Plants with defensive neurotoxin injectors, thorns, seasonal, atmospheric phenomena with wind speeds exceeding 400 kph. Ubiquitous predatory megafauna with crushing bite forces. Mild? Hannah breathed. Compared to the supervolcanoes, the continent-sized hurricanes, and the impact winters, yes, Ningji said. There was no pride in her voice. It was just a fact. That is our home. That is what made us. They continued to the bridge. It was quieter, a hub of focused activity. Captain Jae-suk stood before a large main screen, reviewing data. He turned as they entered. Xenobiologist Hannah, he said. Thank you for coming. We need to understand your life support systems to ensure our presence doesn't harm your environment. Hannah nodded, but her mind was still on the images. Your world. It is violence. Jae-suk considered this. It is challenge. Constant, relentless challenge. It forges you. It teaches you that to stand still is to die. To be passive is to be consumed. He looked at the main screen, which now showed the graceful, fragile form of Sanctuary 7 against the stars. Your station is very beautiful. It is a testament to peace. But peace, he said, turning his calm eyes back to her, is not a default state of the universe. It is a creation. Sometimes it must be defended. With force. A console beeped. Minji went to it. Captain. A long-range communication from the Galactic Concord. Priority channel. They are responding to the distress call. Jae-suk straightened. Put it on speaker, Lieutenant. A voice filled the bridge. It was smooth, cultured, and filled with a gentle sorrow. It was the voice of the Concord. Sanctuary 7, this is Envoy Valeris of the Galactic Concord. We have received your distress signal and the subsequent reports of an unsanctioned military intervention. We are deeply relieved to hear of your survival. However, we must express our grave concern regarding the methods used. The level of violence recorded, the physical destruction of station property. This is not the Concord way. We are dispatching a mediator. Please advise your rescuers. That civilized discourse, not brute force, must guide our actions. The message ended. The bridge was silent. Hannah looked at Jae-suk. His expression had not changed, but something hardened around his eyes. He keyed a response, his voice flat and clear. Concord Envoy Valeris, this is Captain Lee Jae-suk of the United Earthship Unyielding Resolve. The station is secure. The predators are detained. The violence you lament was ended by the only tool the aggressors understood. We await your mediator. Unyielding resolve out. He cut the channel. He looked at Hannah, and for the first time, she saw something in him besides calm command. She saw a deep, unyielding certainty that was far more intimidating than any anger. They offered you sympathies, he stated. We offered a solution. Remember the difference. Hannah stood on the bridge of the ship from a death world, feeling its stronger gravity like a hand on her, breathing its dry, sharp air. She thought of Ji-hun's shrug, of the images of storms and teeth, of the word mild hazards. She thought of the K-Tharg lying bound in the docking bay, defeated not by a more advanced energy weapon, but by beings who considered a plasma burn a manageable injury. The galaxy had always told the Veil they were weak. Now, for the first time, someone had shown them what strong really meant. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about an absolute, unbreakable will to endure and to protect. The silence in the docking bay was fragile. It was broken by the moans of the wounded K-Tharg and the quiet, fearful sobs of the Veil. The humans did not stand still. Sergeant Kin Tashik gestured, and his Marines moved. They secured the K-Tharg with strong, simple binders, not energy cuffs. They checked the aliens for weapons with a thorough, impersonal efficiency. They did not speak to the prisoners. They simply handled them. Captain Jae-suk looked at Day. We need to secure the entire station. There may be more of them. Do you have a layout? A security feed? Day's mind was slow to work. He was still stuck on the side of the human Marine, taking a plasma bolt to the chest and standing back up. Yes, the control room. This way. As Day led Jae-suk and Lieutenant Min-ji away, Hannah found she could not stay still. Her scientific curiosity, crushed by fear before, was now screaming at her. She followed at a distance, watching the humans. She saw how they moved. Every step was planted firmly, as if they were fighting a constant pull downward. They didn't glide like the Veil. They moved with a purposeful heaviness that seemed to shake the very air dot in the control room. Min-ji went straight to the main console. Her fingers, clad in armored gloves, danced over the delicate Veil interfaces with surprising care. She called up the station's sensor logs and security cameras. On one screen, she found a live feed from the central air processor, a large, warm room full of moisture and filtering plants. 2 K-Tharg warriors were there, using it as a hideout, their weapons pointed at the door. Sergeant, Min-ji said into her comms. 2 hostiles, Sector Gamma, the air processor. Heavy foliage, steam, low light. Tae-shik's voice came back, calm. Acknowledged, moving. Hannah watched the security feed. She saw the door to the processor room slide open. Not with a slow, cautious movement, but suddenly. One human Marine stood in the doorway, a clear target. The K-Tharg fired. Plasma bolts tore through the steam. The Marine dropped not hit, but deliberately falling flat. As the K-Tharg focused on the doorway, 2 more Marines erupted from a large maintenance vent in the ceiling behind them. They fell directly onto the warriors. There was no gunfire. Hannah saw quick, brutal movements, the strike of a rifle butt, an armored arm locking around a neck. In seconds, both K-Tharg were limp on the floor. The humans secured them and vanished back into the vents as quickly as they had come. Hannah felt a chill. They hadn't just entered the room. They had used it. They had turned the environment into a weapon. On another screen, a different scene played out. A single K-Tharg was running down a long corridor, trying to reach a shuttle pod. A human Marine, the one who had been burned, was chasing him. The K-Tharg fired behind him, the plasma bolts scorching the walls. The human didn't slow. He was gaining. The K-Tharg reached a junction and slammed his fist on a control panel, sealing a heavy emergency door between them. He turned, panting, a nasty smile on his face. He was safe. On the feed, the human Marine, Corporal Choi Ji-hun, didn't even stop. He lowered his shoulder and hit the door. It wasn't a run. It was a single, powerful impact. The metal of the door groaned. A second impact. A deep dent appeared. A third. With a shriek of tearing metal, the locking mechanism gave way, and the door slid open, jammed and twisted. Ji-hun stepped through, his weapon raised. The K-Tharg's smile vanished, replaced by pure terror. He dropped his weapon and raised his hands. Hana's mind raced. The doors on Sanctuary 7 were designed for pressure containment. They were strong. The human had just broken one through sheer physical force. What kind of bone density, what kind of muscle did that require? Back in the control room, an alarm chimed. Min-ji looked at a new readout. Captain, a group of 4 K-Tharg have retreated into the primary power relay room. They are threatening to overload the core. They are demanding our surrender, or they will blow the station. Jae-suk's face was stone. Options? They have sealed the doors. We could cut through, but it would give them time to act. Min-ji studied the schematic. The room has an emergency coolant line running beneath the floor grating. It's narrow. Very narrow. Jae-suk looked at the schematic, then at the live feed from the corridor outside the relay room. 2 K-Tharg were guarding the door. Can it be accessed? From the lower, maintenance crawlway. It will be a tight fit, even for us. And it will be dark. Pitch dark. The coolant line has leaked. The crawlway is flooded with an electrically opaque fluid. Thermal and energy scans will be useless. A small, grim smile touched Jae-suk's lips. Tell Tae-shik to send Park and Choi. They trained for Verdant Cave simulations. Minutes later, Hannah watched the feed from the dark corridor. Nothing happened for a long time. The 2 K-Tharg guards were tense, scanning with handheld energy sensors, peering into the dim light. Their tools showed nothing. Then, without a sound, the K-Tharg on the left simply collapsed. A moment later, the second one fell. The door remained sealed. A small access panel beside the door, no larger than a Veil's torso, slid open. 2 humans, covered in a black, non-reflective fluid, slithered out. They were unbelievably quiet. They moved to the main door, placed a small device on the control panel, and stepped back. Inside the relay room, the 4 K-Tharg were huddled around the core controls. They will not risk the station. Their leader was shouting, "We hold the power." The main door suddenly blew inward, not with a large explosion, but with a sharp pop that shattered the lock. The room was plunged into absolute darkness as the humans outside shot out the light panel. On the thermal feed, Hana saw the K-Tharg become 4 bright blobs of panic, firing their glowing plasma casters wildly at the doorway. But the humans were not at the door. The thermal feed showed 2 cooler, fast-moving blobs already inside the room, having come through the ceiling vents. They were among the K-Tharg. The feed showed close, violent confusion. The sound was of grunts, the clang of metal on armor, and the sickening crunch of impacts. No human weapon fired. It was all done by hand, in the dark. 30 seconds later, the lights flickered back on. The 4 K-Tharg were on the ground, unconscious or restrained. The 2 humans stood in the middle of the room, breathing heavily, the black fluid dripping from their suits. The station's core hummed quietly. Stable and safe. Hana finally found her voice. She turned to Lieutenant Min-ji, who was monitoring it all calmly. "How? The dark. The tight space. You couldn't see. You couldn't use your weapons." Min-ji glanced at her. "We have a wider visual spectrum than many species. Not much, but some. More importantly, our world has many dark places. We learned to navigate without light. The tight space was an advantage. It meant they couldn't swing their weapons easily either. Close quarters is our friend. Hannah looked back at the screens. She saw the humans now rounding up the last of the Catharg. She saw the way they operated. They weren't just stronger. They were adaptable in a way that seemed terrifying. They used darkness, confusion, fear, and the very structure of the station against their enemy. They didn't just fight the Catharg. They dominated the entire battlefield, making every piece of it a tool or a weapon. Day was right. They didn't just win fights. They conquered environments. She watched Corporal Ji-hun, his burned armor still smoking, help a Marine drag a bound Catharg to the holding area. He moved without a limp, without a sign of the pain that should have been crippling. Hannah, the xenobiologist, looked at these beings from a world she had never heard of, and for the first time, she understood the word that had been in the captain's first transmission, the word she had not fully grasped: Deathworlders. The soft, sad colors of the veil filled the docking bay. They stood in quiet groups, their heads bowed. The Catharg commander, who called himself Gorak, paced before them, his heavy boots thudding on the polished floor. His warriors stood at the exits, their plasma casters humming with energy. "Your existence is now for utility," Gorak said, his translator making the words sound even colder. "You will maintain this station for us. You will sort the supplies. The young and the strong will be taken to the labor markets. The weak." He shrugged, a gesture that needed no translation. Day stood at the front, Hannah beside him. The cut on his brow had stopped bleeding, leaving a dark mark. He felt the weight of every life in the room. He had failed them. Their peace had been a lie, a dream that shattered against the hard reality of creatures like Gorak. Hannah held his arm, her skin a steady, mournful blue. She was a scientist. She observed. She saw the efficient cruelty of the Catharg, the way they saw the Veil not as people, but as things. It was a biological fact to her now. They were prey. A deep, resonant clang echoed through the entire station. It was not the sharp puncture of the Catharg boarding pods. This was different. It was the sound of something massive and solid connecting with the station's hull. A vibration ran through the deck plates, a feeling of raw force. Gorak stopped his pacing. He tilted his head, listening to a report in his earpiece. "One ship," he grunted, a smirk on his leathery face. "A small, stupid ship. It docks without permission. It ignores all hails." He looked at the Veil, enjoying their confusion. More scrap for the furnaces. Perhaps they have come to surrender. The main external door of the docking bay, the one leading to the hard vacuum of space, began to cycle. The Catharg warriors immediately turned their weapons toward it, forming a rough half-circle. The Veil shrank back, their colors flickering with new fear. Who was arriving now? More predators? The door sealed with a hiss. For a moment, there was silence. Then, with a sound of heavy hydraulics, the inner door began to slide open. The first thing Hannah noticed was the shape. It was not sleek or elegant. It was a door on a human ship, and it was thick, angular, and studded with heavy bolts. It opened to reveal a dimly lit airlock, and from it, figures emerged. They were nothing like the Veil or the Catharg. They were built with a dense, heavy solidity. They wore environmental suits of matte gray, sealed and armored. Their helmets were blank, dark visors that gave away nothing. They moved with a deliberate, grounded weight, as if the light gravity of the station was a mere suggestion to them. They carried weapons, but not glowing energy casters. These were blocky, mechanical things with physical barrels. There were 10 of them. They fanned out with a quiet, professional efficiency, not aiming their weapons, but ready. They scanned the room, the cowering Vale, the arrogant Catharg. Their movements were clean, without panic or posturing. One of them, whose suit had a single white stripe on the shoulder, stepped forward. This was Captain Lee Jae-suk. His voice came through an external speaker, translated by a unit on his belt. It was the same voice from the transmission, calm and utterly firm. By the laws of the Galactic Concord, you are engaged in illegal predation on a protected refuge. You will lower your weapons and submit to detention. The statement hung in the air. Gorak stared, then let out a barking laugh that echoed in the bay. His warriors chuckled, the sound harsh and mocking. You are one ship, Gorak sneered, taking a step forward. His bulk dwarfed the human captain. You wear shells. You carry primitive noisemakers. You give me orders? He gestured widely at his warriors. We are Catharg. We are strength. You are nothing. Drop your tools and kneel. Your ship is mine now. Jae-suk did not move. Behind his visor, his eyes were on Gorak, but his mind was on the room. He saw the positions of the 8 Catharg warriors. He saw the 53 Vale civilians, unarmed and terrified. He saw the exits. Lieutenant Park Minji, standing just behind his left shoulder, had already done the same scan. Sergeant Kim Tae-shik and his Marines were statues, waiting for the word. The order stands, Jae-suk said, his tone unchanged. This is your only warning. Gorak's smirk vanished, replaced by pure fury. Kill them all. He roared, raising his plasma caster. The world exploded into violence. A Catharg warrior fired first. A bolt of searing green plasma shot across the bay. It was fast, meant to vaporize flesh. Jae-suk did not dive aside. He shifted his weight, and the bolt sizzled past his shoulder, close enough to scorch the armor. At the same moment, Tae-shik barked a single word. Engage. The sound was deafening. The human weapons did not whine or hum. They cracked. Sharp, thunderous bangs that echoed off the walls. Hannah flinched, a physical pain from the noise alone. A Catharg warrior who had been aiming at a group of Vale jerked backwards, a spray of dark fluid erupting from his neck. He collapsed, his plasma caster clattering to the floor. The projectile had not exploded. It had simply punched through his armor with brutal force. The humans were moving. They did not stand and trade fire. They moved in pairs. One would draw fire with a short, precise burst from their weapon, the projectiles kicking up sparks, where they hit the floor or walls, while the other advanced or flanked. Their movements were not graceful, but they were terrifyingly efficient. They used the docking bay's cargo containers and pillars as cover, not hiding, but controlling the angles of the fight. Gorak bellowed, firing wildly. A Marine was hit in the chest by a plasma bolt. There was a flash of light and heat. The Marine was thrown back a step, his armor smoking. He grunted, looked down at the glowing molten spot on his breastplate, and then raised his weapon again and fired back. He was not dead. He was not even out of the fight. Hana watched, her scientific mind screaming in confusion. The energy from that plasma bolt should have cooked the being inside the suit. But the human was still fighting. What were they made of? Minji, her movements swift, had pulled a smaller device from her thigh. She aimed it not at a warrior, but at a cluster of power conduits on the ceiling above 2 Catharg. She fired. A small canister stuck to the metal and emitted a piercing high-frequency shriek. The Catharg screamed, dropping their weapons and clutching their sound-sensitive hearing organs. They were not killed. They were neutralized. Tae-shik and 2 Marines advanced on Gorak himself. The Catharg leader fired, missing. The human's return fire was not aimed at his head or chest. 3 sharp cracks sounded, and Gorak's legs gave out. He crashed to the floor, roaring in pain and surprise. They had targeted his joints, the gaps in his armor. The fight was over in less than a minute. 3 Kaitharg were dead. 4 were writhing on the ground, disarmed and disabled. Gorak was pinned, a Marine's boot on his wrist. The muzzle of that blocky weapon pressed to his helmet. The sudden silence was broken only by the ringing in Hana's ears, and the low moans of the wounded Kaitharg. The air smelled of ozone, hot metal, and something sharp and chemical. Captain Jae-suk walked to the center of the bay. He reached up and unsealed his helmet with a hiss. He took it off, revealing a face that was stern, hair cropped short, with eyes that swept over the veil. They were not gentle eyes. They were the eyes of someone who had just done a hard job and was checking for the next task. He looked at Day and Hana. "Are you the leaders here?" Day could only nod, his skin a stunned, washed-out white. "Captain Lee Jae-suk, United Earthship Unyielding Resolve," he said. "The station is secure." He glanced at the wounded Marine, who was now sitting up, being checked by a comrade. "Sergeant, report." "Armor breach, minor burn, Captain," the Marine said, his voice tight but clear. "I'm fine." Jae-suk gave a single nod. He then looked at the terrified Veil, at their delicate, beautiful forms, and at the brutal, bleeding Kaitharg on the floor. The difference between the two was absolute. He spoke, his voice still calm, but it carried a new weight in the quiet bay. "Your waiting is over." The station was a place of quiet beauty. It floated in the serene blackness of space, a delicate sculpture of silver and soft light. Sanctuary 7 was its name, and it was home to the Veil. They were a gentle people, their forms slender, their skin shifting with faint colors that mirrored their emotions. There were no sharp corners on the station, no loud noises. Gravity was light, the air sweet and calm. It was a perfect refuge, until the day it became a perfect trap. Hana stood at the large observation window, her hands pressed against the cool, transparent material. The usual soft blues of her skin had faded into a dull, worried gray. Outside, the stars were being blotted out by ugly, angular ships. They were the color of dried blood and moved with a vicious, purposeful speed. The Kaitharg. For cycles, their raids had been whispers on the galactic data stream's horror stories from the frontier. Now the story was here. "We cannot fight them," they said from behind her. His voice was thin, full of a sorrow that made the bioluminescent spots on his neck pulse a dim purple. He was the station's administrator. His entire life had been dedicated to learning, to art, to understanding the delicate connections between living things. Violence was not just foreign to him. It was a sickness of the mind. Our technology is for life, not for. For that, Hana, a xenobiologist, nodded slowly. She understood life. She studied the ecosystems of placid worlds, where the greatest predator might be a filter feeder. She looked at the Kaitharg vessels and saw only engines of death. "The Concord," she whispered, a last flicker of hope turning her fingertips a faint yellow. "They will send help. They have to." Day placed a long-fingered hand on her shoulder. "I have sent the distress calls. Every cycle for the last 3 rotations. The Concord hears us. They send their deepest sympathies." The word sympathies hung in the air. It was not a shield. It was not a weapon. It was nothing. A deep, shuddering thump vibrated through the deck. Then another, and another. Hana's view of the stars was now broken by dark, pod-like shapes slamming into the station's outer hall. They latched on like metallic parasites. The Kaitharg were boarding. Alarms sounded across Sanctuary 7. They were not blaring sirens, but soft, chime-like tones of escalating urgency. The Veil in the central concourse did not run. They gathered, their collective fear painting the room in washes of gray and mournful indigo. Children huddled close to adults, their large, dark eyes wide with confusion. There was no panic, only a profound, helpless sadness. They were waiting. Day moved to a console, his fingers trembling as he activated the station-wide comm. "Please," he said, his voice carrying to every corridor and garden. "Do not resist. Offer no violence. To fight is to become like them. We must endure." The words tasted like ash. To endure what? Slavery? The destruction of their peaceful home? He had no answer. Hannah left the window and joined the others. She held the hand of a young one, its skin a frightened, flickering white. She watched the main atmospheric door to the docking bay. It was there the end would come. With a hiss of violating pressure, the door opened. The K-Tharg warriors stood framed in the doorway. They were massive, their bodies encased in scarred, functional armor. They carried heavy plasma casters, the barrels glowing with a hungry green light. They moved into the concourse, their steps heavy and loud on the delicate floor. The veil flinched back as one, a silent wave of color shifting to a uniform. Defeated gray, the lead K-Tharg S-helmet retracted, revealing a face of leathery hide and sharp, yellowed teeth. He scanned the room, his eyes glinting with cold satisfaction. "This station," his voice grated through a translator unit, "is now property of the K-Tharg Collective. Your lives are forfeit. You will work. You will be sold. Resistance is death." He paused, savoring the absolute silence, the complete lack of threat. "You are weak. The galaxy is for the strong." Day stepped forward, his hands open and empty. "Please, we have resources. We can give you what you need." "There is no need for this." The K-Tharg commander backhanded him. The blow was not meant to kill, but to demonstrate. Day fell to the floor, a thin trickle of silver-blue blood welling from a cut on his brow, his skin flashing a spike of pain red before settling into a bruised, submissive violet. A soft murmur of distress rippled through the veil, but no one moved. They waited, as they had been taught. Powerlessly. Hannah helped Day sit up, her own colors a swirl of anger orange and despair deep blue. This was it. This was their end. Not in a blaze of glory, but in a whimper of submission. She looked at the K-Tharg, at their weapons, at their cruel eyes, and felt a hollow emptiness. The Concord sympathies would arrive too late. A nice thought sent to a dead station. Suddenly, the station's communication panel fizzed with static. A new signal, raw and powerful, cut through the K-Thargs jamming with brute force. The audio was clipped, the voice speaking in a language the Veil had never heard. Their own system scrambled to translate. Sanctuary -7. Static. This is UE unyielding resolve. Heavy interference. Stand by. We are coming in. The voice was gone as quickly as it came. The K-Tharg commander snarled, looking at his own scanner. A new ship? No Concord signature. Ignore it. It is one small vessel. Continue the processing. But the words hung in the air. We are coming in. They were not words of sympathy. They were words of action. They were a statement, not a plea. Hannah felt a bizarre, unfamiliar sensation. A flicker. Not quite hope it was too sharp for that. It was more like curiosity. Who, in this peaceful sector, would announce their arrival like that? Who would see the cog blockade and not turn away? On the main viewing screen, which had shown only the K-Tharg fleet, a new blip appeared. It was moving fast, not with the graceful arcs of Concord ships, but in a straight, uncompromising line. It was heading directly for Sanctuary 7. It was not asking for permission. Day wiped the blood from his face, his large eyes fixed on the screen. The waiting was not over, but the nature of what they were waiting for had just changed. The powerlessness was still there, a heavy blanket over them all. But now, outside their fragile, beautiful prison of a station, something new was approaching. Something that did not sound gentle. Something that announced its coming with a promise, not a condolence. The veil weighted, their fate no longer solely in the hands of their captors, but cast into the unknown, toward the source of that gritty, determined voice from the dark.